Hello, I'm Charlie. I'm 23 and recently moved to Philadelphia for my first real job as a marketing assistant at a small downtown agency. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and it feels good to finally be doing something grown up after college. The move was thrilling at first, new city, new apartment, new everything. But once the boxes were unpacked, the quiet evenings started to feel empty. I don't know many people here yet. My coworkers are nice enough, but most have their own lives, family schedules. After work, I'd go home, microwave something quick, and scroll through my phone too long. That's why I signed up for a drawing class to break the routine. I'd always loved drawing when I was younger, but school and work left little time for hobbies. I figured now was as good a time as any to start again. If you love drawing, let me know in the comments. The class met twice a week in a small community hall near Fairmount. Nothing fancy, just long tables, creaky, folding chairs, and the hum of old fluorescent lights. Everyone seemed to know each other except me. I arrived early the first night, trying to look casual despite feeling anything but. A few others were already setting up, mostly older folks, chatting softly as they unpacked sketch pads and sharpened pencils. I took a seat near the window, laid out my supplies, and tried not to count the minutes. Then she walked in. I didn't know her name yet, but she caught my attention immediately. Not because she was loud or flashy, but the opposite. She moved with a calm, quiet confidence that made the room feel smaller. Middle to late 30s, maybe older, but elegant. She wore a dark coat over a simple sweater, her hair loosely pulled back. She scanned the room briefly before sitting one seat away from me, close enough that I caught a faint hint of her perfume. Nothing heavy. I kept my head down, trying not to stare. A few minutes later, Paul, the instructor, started the class with simple form shading exercises to ease everyone in. I focused on my sketch, trying to draw a circle that didn't look like a squashed tomato. That's when she spoke. "Not bad," she said quietly, glancing at my page with a slight smile. I looked up, a bit startled. She had kind eyes, warm. "I've definitely seen worse circles," she teased. I chuckled, feeling a bit more at ease. "That's comforting. I'm aiming for passable tonight. Maybe next week I'll go for identifiable." Her smile widened. "Solid plan. Manage expectations." I grinned back. "I'm Charlie, by the way." "Emma," she replied, offering a soft handshake, her touch gentle, her grip easy. "Nice to meet you." Uda. The rest of the class went by quickly. We exchanged a few more small comments. Nothing major, but I'd catch her glancing over the meeting my eyes for a moment before returning to her sketch. When class ended, we packed up slowly, both lingering without saying so. As we stepped into the crisp night air, she fell into step beside me. First-class nerves out of the way, she asked. I exhaled. "I think so. Survived my first public sketching embarrassment." She laughed softly. "Good. The hardest part's showing up." We walked a few blocks talking about light things, jobs, moving to the city, her work as an interior designer. She mentioned she'd been divorced for a few years, but didn't linger on it, speaking with a calm that suggested she'd made peace with a lot. We stopped at the corner where our paths split. "See you Thursday," she asked, her voice light. "Yeah, Thursday," I said, maybe too quickly. She smiled again, then turned and walked down the quiet street. I stood there a moment before heading home. Philadelphia already felt a little less lonely. The next class couldn't come soon enough. I didn't want to make too much of it. It was just a friendly chat with a classmate, but when Thursday rolled around, I got there a bit earlier than usual. Emma arrived soon after, catching my eye as she walked in, smiling like we were old friends. That small, natural smile stuck with me longer than I'd admit. She sat in the same spot, one seat away, like we'd silently claimed it as our spot. Back for round two, she teased softly, unpacking her sketchbook. "Yeah, couldn't let my terrible circles ruin my career," I joked. She laughed quietly and the ice broke again. Paul went over shading exercises that night, and while everyone scribbled, Emma and I talked quietly during breaks. It was easy to talk to her, more natural than I expected from someone I just met. Between pencil strokes, I learned bits about her life. She grew up in New Jersey, moved to Philly after college, married young, divorced a few years ago. No kids, but she adored her niece. She worked on home projects and small commercial spaces, talking about her work with quiet confidence, like she'd known who she was for a long time. When she asked about me, I felt less impressive by comparison. Marketing assistant, I said with a half shrug. Basically spend my days answering emails and scheduling meetings for people who seem busier than they are. She grinned. Sounds like most jobs. That got me laughing. Yeah, I guess so. Still getting used to it all. First real job, first real apartment, first time living on my own, to be honest. Her expression softened. That's a good place to be. It can be hard sometimes, but you figure it out as you go. There was something in how she said it, like she was speaking from experience. By the end of class, I wasn't watching the clock like usual. We walked out together again and it felt easier than the first time. You hungry? She asked as we reached the corner. I blinked, surprised. Oh yeah, actually. There's a little cafe a block away. They're open late, she said. We walked to the small cafe, quiet and warm with a few tables scattered near the windows. The city hummed outside, but inside it felt like its own little world. Boom. We ordered 2 coffees and took a corner table. The conversation stayed light, music, movies, travel. She told me about her solo trip to Italy after her divorce, both terrifying and freeing. I shared how I barely survived college without burning out, and how Philly still felt daunting. It'll feel smaller eventually, she said gently. Cities shrink as you spend more time in them. We talked until the lights dimmed for closing. As we stepped back onto the sidewalk, the night air was chilly, but not uncomfortable. The city lights reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. For a moment, everything felt easy. Thanks for the coffee, I said. Of course, she replied, smiling. See you Monday. Yeah, Monday. I watched her walk away, her grace effortless. I knew I wanted to see her again, not just in class. By the third week, seeing Emma was the best part of class, the drawing. Sure, I was improving, but it was the quiet moments, the glances, the side conversations, the way she smiled when she saw me, that made the night special. We fell into a rhythm, sit in the same seats, share small jokes during warm-ups, then walk out together. Neither of us said it outright, but we both seemed content with how things were going. One Monday night, it was pouring rain. I hadn't checked the forecast, so I stood at the entrance staring at the downpour. Emma stepped up beside me, opening a small black umbrella. You're not walking through that, are you? She asked. I shrugged. Guess I didn't plan that far ahead. Without another word, she tilted the umbrella toward me. Come on, we'll share. I hesitated for a second, then stepped under it beside her. The umbrella was barely big enough for 2, so we walked close, our arms brushing a few times, sending small sparks through me that I tried to hide. As we walked down the block, the rain eased to a drizzle, the streets glowing with the orange light of the city. Everything felt quieter, like the city was stepping aside to give us space. Emma paused as we reached our usual splitting point. Got a few minutes, she asked. There's a little place just up here, she added, gesturing ahead. Dry, warm, good tea. I nodded my heart, picking up slightly. Sure. We went into a small tea shop I hadn't noticed before. Inside, soft music played and the air smelled faintly of ginger and honey. We found a corner table tucked away from the door. Over steaming mugs of tea, the conversation drifted to deeper waters. I feel like I'm doing this part of life backwards, sometimes I admitted. Most people figure themselves out in college, right? But I'm just starting to know who I am. Emma looked at me for a moment, then smiled gently. There's no right way to do it, Charlie. People find themselves at different times. Some never do. She spoke like she'd seen it all before. I was quiet for a second, then asked, did you know what you wanted at my age? She gave a soft laugh. Not even close. She swirled her tea slowly. At your age, I thought I had it all figured out, got married, settled. Did what I thought I was supposed to, and now I asked gently. She met my gaze, her expression calm but fierce. Now I try to make choices that feel right, not what I'm told is right. We sat there, the hum of the tea shop filling the silence. There was no awkwardness, no rush to fill the gap, just a quiet comfort between us. When we stood to leave, she slipped on her coat, adjusting the collar with that graceful ease. As we stepped back into the street, the rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and fresh. Thanks for staying, she said softly. Of course, I replied, looking at her a beat longer than I probably should have. For a second, I wondered if she noticed. Maybe she did. She met my gaze, briefly smiled, and walked away. I stood there a moment before heading home, my mind racing. Whatever was happening between us was subtle, but it was real. Every time we said goodnight, it grew a little more. By this point, seeing Emma felt like the most natural part of my week. What surprised me was how effortless it was. No pressure, no awkward labels. There was something about our slow, steady pace that pulled me in. One Thursday, Paul announced a change. Instead of class, he'd arranged an optional trip up to a nearby gallery to see a cityscape and architectural sketch exhibit. Most of the class planned to go, but as the evening neared, people dropped out one by one. When I arrived, Emma was waiting outside the gallery entrance, wearing a long, dark coat over a simple navy dress, her hair down softly framing her face. She smiled as soon as she saw me. "Looks like it's just us," she said. "Fine with me," I replied before thinking. The gallery was softly lit, its walls lined with black and white sketches of Philly rooftops, bridges, and narrow alleys. We wandered slowly, sometimes talking, sometimes just standing side by side in silence. We stopped in front of a large piece, a detailed pencil drawing of an old row house, like the ones on every block in the city. She spoke softly. "There's something soothing about drawings like this. You can feel the care in the details." I glanced at her. The way she looked at the piece, steady, thoughtful, made me see it differently. "Ever think about living somewhere else?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "I used to. After the divorce, I thought about leaving Philly, entirely starting fresh somewhere new. But this place grows on you." She paused. "And sometimes you find new reasons to stay." Her words hung there. I didn't press or ask what she meant, but I felt their weight. Duh. We kept walking, not paying much attention to where we were going, just moving through the quiet streets together. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, childhood memories, favorite foods, embarrassing first job stories. As we crossed a quiet intersection, she reached out and gently touched my arm, steering me away from a passing bike. It was a small gesture, but her hand left a warmth on my skin, lingering a moment longer than needed. Neither of us mentioned it. Eventually, we reached her building. We stood by the entrance, both hesitating. "I had a great time tonight," I said, my voice quieter than usual, like I didn't want to break the calm around us. "Me too," she said, her tone soft. There was a pause, not awkward but charged. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I wondered if she expected me to do something, or maybe I was just hoping she did. Instead, she gave that small smile that always tightened my chest and said softly, "Good night, Charlie. Good night, Emma." I watched her disappear behind the building's door, hands in my jacket pockets, heart beating a little faster. The walk home felt longer, quieter. Time. The next week, we shared a quiet rhythm. Nothing was said outright, but something had shifted. Our glances lingered longer, the pauses in conversation heavier, but not uncomfortable, like we were both testing the edges of something we didn't want to name. Emma arrived at class one Thursday with a large portfolio bag. "Big project?" I asked as she sat down. "Client presentation tomorrow. Tonight's for final touches," she said with a soft sigh and a smile. "But I'd rather be here, meeting." We worked through the session as usual, but my focus was off. I kept glancing at her instead of my sketch. She looked more tired than usual, but still carried that effortless grace. As we packed up after class, she spoke before I could. "Mind helping me out?" she asked. "This thing's heavier than I expected." She gestured to the portfolio bag. "Of course," I said. We walked to her place together, carrying her things, the cool night air around us. The city buzzed faintly, but the streets were mostly quiet. Her building wasn't far, a mid-rise tucked in a calmer block that felt more like a small village than a big city. Bang. She unlocked the door and looked back at me. "If you're not in a rush, you're welcome to come up for a bit, just to drop it inside." I hesitated for half a second. "Sure." Her apartment was exactly what I expected: warm, thoughtfully designed without trying too hard, with soft lighting, framed art on the walls, and shelves lined with design books and small travel mementos. It felt lived in, but serene like her. I set the portfolio by her desk and took in the space. "You've got good taste," I said, half teasing, half serious. She smiled, slipping off her coat. "Well, it's my job." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of wine. "You deserve this for carrying all that," she said, handing me a glass and sitting beside me on the couch, her knees curling slightly toward me. The space between us had shrunk, and it seemed neither of us minded. We talked for a while, falling into our usual comfortable rhythm, but tonight something felt heavier. Her eyes lingered when she smiled, her voice softer. We both went quiet at the same time, neither looking away. I could feel my pulse quicken a brief internal battle over whether to move closer or stay put. Then she shifted, closing the gap just enough, her knee barely touching my leg, not moving away. Her voice was quiet. "You're easy to talk to, you know that." I swallowed my throat, slightly dry. "I feel the same way." Another pause long enough to feel deliberate. The tension hung like a thread about to snap. I leaned closer, our faces inches apart, looking into her eyes one last time for a sign to stop to pull back. There wasn't one. When I finally leaned in, she met me halfway. The kiss was soft at first, almost hesitant, but all hesitation melted when her hand touched my face, pulling me closer. We kissed slowly, letting it unfold naturally, no rush, no fumbling, just a steady, quiet hunger that had been building for weeks. After a while, she pulled back slightly, her forehead resting gently against mine. Eyes closed. "I wasn't sure if we'd crossed that line," she whispered. "Neither was I admitted softly, "but I'm glad we did." She smiled, her hand resting on my chest. "Me too." The rest of the night passed quietly. Though I won't say we only talked. The way her fingers grazed my arm, the way she leaned into me, the unspoken things said more than words could. When morning came, soft light filtered through her curtains. Her head rested on my shoulder, her breathing slow and even. My jacket was still draped over the chair, my shoes by the door, and I wasn't in a hurry to leave. Ahem. After that night, something shifted, not in a grand sweeping way, but in quiet, subtle ways that felt more real. We still went to class, sat in our usual seats, exchanged glances that meant more than before, but now, when class ended, it was rarely a question of whether I'd walk her home. It became routine. What changed were the nights that followed. We'd sometimes cook together, at her place, simple dinners, nothing fancy. She'd move around the kitchen with that casual ease, barefoot hair, loosely tied back, humming softly as she chopped vegetables or stirred sauces. I'd sit nearby, pretending to help, but mostly watching her, the way she smiled at her own small mistakes, how she'd catch my eye with that brief teasing look, like she knew exactly what I was thinking. Bye. One night we made dinner together, grilled salmon with a quick salad she threw together. After we ate, we sat on the couch for hours talking about everything and nothing, work's frustrations, childhood memories, silly debates about the best breakfast food. At some point, my arm went around her shoulders. Her head rested comfortably against mine, and neither of us felt the need to break the silence. The ease of it all was comforting, but beneath it, there was always a quiet tension. Not bad, not uncomfortable, just present. The physical closeness wasn't new anymore, but every touch still carried a slight thrill. Her hand would rest on my knee as she laughed. My fingers would lightly trail up her arm when we sat together. Nights often ended with her pulling me closer, her voice softer, warmer. We both knew when words weren't needed anymore. We never really defined what this was. Neither of us used words like relationship or dating. It was just us. It came up once briefly. We were on her balcony one night, listening to the quiet summer air moving through the city below. The street lights cast a soft glow on her face as she leaned against me, a glass of wine in her hand. "This isn't what I expected," she said softly, almost to herself. I looked down at her. "What do you mean?" She smiled slightly. "When I signed up for the class, I thought I'd meet some new people, make some friends." She trailed off. "Not this." I waited, letting her continue if she wanted. She turned her head slightly, looking up at me. "I didn't expect you." There was something in how she said it, not dramatic or heavy, just honest. I squeezed her hand gently. "Me neither." She smiled again and we settled into a comfortable silence. We didn't know where this was going, but neither of us was ready to let it go. At work, my coworkers probably thought my nights were still quiet and ordinary. They had no idea about the late evenings at her apartment, the way she'd casually run her fingers through my hair while we watched old movies, or how I'd wake to the soft feel of her body curled against mine as the first light slipped through her blinds. We were building something, even if we didn't know what it was yet, and that was enough for now. But in the back of my mind, I knew this peace wouldn't last forever. Boom. I first noticed him by accident. It was a Saturday morning. I'd stayed over at Emma's the night before, which was becoming more common, but we kept it quiet. I got up early as usual and made us coffee while she slept. The city outside was just waking up, traffic lights, a few people walking dogs, the usual city hum, still soft. I was sipping my coffee by her kitchen window when a black SUV pulled up across the street. The man who got out was tall, well-dressed in tailored casual clothes that screamed money, and habit maybe mid-40s, with a sharp haircut and an expensive watch. He stood on the sidewalk staring up at Emma's building like he was making a decision. Then his eyes locked on me at the window. It wasn't a long stare down, just a fleeting glance that registered who I was. A few minutes later, the buzzer rang. Emma sighed, pulling on her robe, and glanced at the door. "That's him," she said softly. "Your ex?" I asked. She nodded, rubbing her temples. "Don't worry, you don't have to go anywhere. I'll handle it." I couldn't help it. I slipped into the bedroom to give them space. I didn't want to complicate things, but I was curious about what was said. Their voices were low, but some carried. "Emma, you're not answering my calls because there's nothing to talk about, Mark," she said, her tone gentle but firm. A pause, then he said, sharp but measured. "You know what people are saying, hear things. I don't care what you hear," she replied bluntly. "You're seeing someone," he said, his tone sharper. "Are you really doing this with some kid?" That word hit harder than it should have, kid. Emma's voice stayed steady. "It's not your business anymore who I spend my time with." Another pause, then his voice dropped too low for me to hear. Moments later, the front door clicked shut. I waited a beat before stepping back into the living room. Emma stood by the window, arms crossed, loosely staring out as his SUV pulled away. "You okay?" I asked cautiously. She turned to me, her eyes tired but steady. "Yeah, he still thinks he has a say in my life." I walked over, resting my hands gently on her waist. "Want to talk about it?" She shook her head, a small smile breaking through. "No, not really. Not now." I kissed her forehead and she leaned into me for a moment. We didn't bring it up again that day, but it lingered quietly between us. After that, the feeling of being seen, of existing outside our little world, was harder to ignore. One evening as we walked through Rittenhouse Square, I noticed Emma's hand slip from mine when someone got too close, not out of shame. I never felt that, but because people talk, especially with her ex around. But when we were alone, nothing else mattered. Later that night, back at her apartment, she stood by the window, looking out quietly. I came up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist. She leaned back into me and sighed softly. "I don't want him getting in your head," she said quietly. "He's not," murmured into her hair. "I know what this is. I know what we are." She turned to face me, her expression soft, but carrying something deeper, like she was making a quiet decision. Her fingers gently traced my jaw, pulling me closer until her lips met mine. Whatever pressure existed outside those walls didn't matter, at least not tonight, and that was enough for now. Um, Over the next 2 weeks, things became more consistent, not easier or lighter, but steady. We saw each other often. Our routine felt second nature, drawing classes, quiet dinners at her place, lazy morning coffees when neither of us rushed to leave the bed. The city outside kept moving as usual, but in our little space, time slowed. We didn't talk much about Mark after that day. He stayed on the edges, sending her texts she ignored, occasionally trying to rattle her. But we stopped giving him air. One Saturday, Emma suggested we drive to the city's outskirts for some fresh air. It was one of those bright early spring evenings when Philly finally started shaking off winter. We ended up in a small park tucked away where the world felt far away. The story of Charlie and Emma teaches us a profound lesson about the beauty of human connection and the courage it takes to embrace new beginning even when life feels uncertain. Their bond, sparked in the quiet moments of a drawing class, shows that meaningful relationships often grow from small, authentic interactions, a shared laugh, a walk in the rain, a moment of vulnerability. Emma's journey from a guarded divorcee to someone open to love again highlights the importance of taking risks to find joy, while Charlie's willingness to step into her world with patience reminds us that true connection requires empathy and presence. The subtle tension of their unspoken feelings, coupled with the challenges posed by Emma's past, underscores that love is rarely simple, but can flourish when built on mutual respect and understanding. Their story is a reminder to stay open to life's unexpected gifts, even when they come with complications, and to cherish the moments that make us feel truly seen. This tale resonates because it captures the tender, messy reality of building something real amidst life's uncertainties. Have you ever found a connection that surprised you growing from a small moment into something meaningful? Share your stories in the comments. We'd love to hear how these moments have shaped your life. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more emotional, inspiring tales that explore the depths of human connection. Let's keep the conversation going and celebrate the beauty of life's unexpected bonds together.